The morning air felt heavy with loss, though at the time I didn't know exactly what I'd lost. It was late autumn in upstate New York, the kind that paints the trees in shades of crimson and gold. The funeral home sat quietly at the end of a sleepy street lined with maple trees that shed their leaves like tears. I parked my car, shut off the engine, and took a deep breath, bracing myself. I was a woman of 54, someone who thought she knew what grief was. I'd lost my parents years ago, a close friend to cancer, but nothing could have prepared me for this. My husband, David, had died in a car accident just a week earlier. I'd spent those days in a daze, phone calls to family, emails to his colleagues, the exhausting logistics of death. Now, standing at the entrance to the funeral home, I expected sadness, confusion maybe, but not the whirlwind of revelations waiting inside. I moved through the corridor, the carpet muffling my steps, the scent of lilies and old wood filling the air. Friends and colleagues offered polite condolences. "He was a good man," one of them said, gripping my hand a little too tightly. I nodded, thanked them, but the words felt hollow. It was only when I reached the front row, where David's siblings sat, that I saw her. A woman in her late 30s, her eyes rimmed red, holding the hand of a boy who looked no older than 10. She wore a dark navy dress, and though I didn't know her, something in her posture, half defiant, half crushed, made my stomach twist. Our eyes met for the briefest moment, and a chill ran through me. She quickly looked away, but not before. The boy leaned into her side and whispered something. Her hand trembled as she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I tried to convince myself she was just a friend, maybe a cousin I'd never met, but deep inside, something dark and sharp started to gnaw at me. The service began. I barely heard the eulogy, words blurred, faces blurred. But even through the haze, I felt the woman's presence, a secret waiting to detonate. Afterward, as the crowd thinned and people began drifting toward their cars, I turned to David's sister, Margaret. "Who was that woman?" I asked, my voice low. Margaret's eyes darted toward the parking lot, where the woman stood beside the boy. I'm not sure it's the right time," she stammered. "Maybe we should talk later." My heart thundered. "Margaret, please, who is she?" Margaret sighed, pressing her lips together, her gaze fixed on the ground. "Her name is Melissa. And that boy, he's David's son." The world tilted. I heard the wind in the trees and the crunch of leaves underfoot. I felt the ground, unsteady, and the air suddenly too thin. David's son, a second family. My mind raced. How could I have missed this? How long had he been living this double life? And what else hadn't I known? As Margaret moved to comfort me, I stepped back, refusing her hand. Grief mixed with fury, a quiet rage that felt more solid than any love I'd ever known. I didn't know where this would lead, but I knew one thing. I couldn't stay in the life David had built on lies. Right there, in the crisp autumn air of my husband's funeral, I made the first decision that would change everything. The days that followed the funeral were a blur of condolences, casseroles, and polite half-smiles. Every time someone told me they were so sorry for my loss, I wanted to scream. Loss? They didn't even know the half of it. I'd lost more than a husband. I'd lost the illusion of a life I thought was mine. David's lawyer, a mild-mannered man named Stephen Withers, called 2 days later to arrange the reading of the will. "We need to finalize the estate," he said, his tone all business. I agreed to meet him at his office the following morning. The office was in a gray brick building on the outskirts of town, a place I'd been to a handful of times over the years to sign papers and talk taxes. The waiting room smelled of old carpet and coffee. I sat there, staring at a water stain on the ceiling, wondering what other secrets David had hidden from me. Stephen greeted me with the same calm expression he'd worn at the funeral. He was in his late 50s, with kind eyes and a voice that always reminded me of a teacher. "I'm sorry for your loss, Claire," he said, gesturing for me to sit. "Let's just get this over with," I said, my voice sharp even to my own ears. He gave a small nod, opening a thick manila folder. "David's will was updated last year," he began. "He left everything to you, Claire, with the exception of a trust fund set aside for his son." I flinched as if he'd struck me. "His son," I echoed. The words felt foreign in my mouth. I could still see the boy's face at the funeral, the same dark hair as David, the same uncertain smile. Stephen paused, choosing his words carefully. "It's standard, given the circumstances. David wanted to ensure both families were provided. For both families." The bitterness in my voice made Stephen wince. "I understand how difficult this must be," he said gently. "I wish there was more I could say." But what was there to say? David had lived a double life. For how long? I couldn't help but wonder. Had he loved her more, or me? Or had he just been a coward, unable to choose? My mind twisted around questions that had no answers. Stephen cleared his throat, drawing my attention back to the folder. "David left you the house, the cars, all joint savings accounts. He also left instructions that you could liquidate the estate if you wished. I know this is a lot to process, but you have full authority to decide. Liquidate the estate." The words struck a chord in me. The house, the home I'd spent years decorating, the kitchen where I'd cooked dinners while waiting for him to come home late. Every piece of furniture, every photo frame, every flower in the garden. They were all touched by his lies. "Can I sell it all?" I asked, my voice steady. "Everything?" Stephen hesitated, then nodded. "If that's what you want, yes. You can sell the house, the cars, everything. You're free to do as you wish." For the first time in days, a flicker of control sparked inside me. I'd felt powerless at the funeral, at the betrayal, but this was a choice I could make for myself. "Do it," I said, my jaw set. "List it all. I want to sell everything." Stephen blinked, surprised, but he nodded. "Are you sure? Maybe you should think—" "I've thought enough," I said, my voice cold but certain. "There's nothing here for me anymore. I need a fresh start." He nodded, scribbling a note. "I'll get the paperwork started." I stood, the weight on my chest easing just a little. The lies David had built around me, they were his. But now, finally, I could take them apart, piece by piece, and decide what to build from the wreckage. As I left the office, the summer sky felt clearer than it had in weeks. For the first time since the funeral, I felt the possibility of freedom. The house was quiet, almost too quiet, as if it held its breath waiting for me to make the first move. Every corner felt haunted by a memory. The creak in the hallway where David used to pause to kiss me goodnight, the coffee ring on the kitchen table from lazy Sunday mornings that now felt like lies. I started in the living room, a space that once felt warm and inviting. Now it was just a collection of furniture and half-forgotten stories. I picked up a photo of us at Niagara Falls, the mist swirling behind us as we smiled at the camera. My smile looked so genuine back then, unaware of the other life David had, kept hidden. I placed the photo face down in a box labeled "To Sell, Boxes." That's what my life had become, sorting memories into boxes, deciding what was worth keeping, what I could live without. Most of it felt like clutter now. The couch where we'd binge-watched movies, the bookshelf crammed with novels we'd pretended to read together. It all felt like set pieces in a play that had ended. In the kitchen, I paused by the window overlooking the small garden I'd tended for years. I used to wait there for him, watching the driveway, hoping to catch the moment he pulled in after work. How many of those nights had he lied? I'd never know. I opened the cabinets, pulling out dishes, mugs, the wine glasses we'd bought on. A weekend trip to Vermont. I wondered if he'd ever toasted with her, his other wife, using the same glass. The thought made my stomach churn. I set the glasses aside, determined to sell them too. I called Stephen that afternoon to confirm the real estate agent would come by the next day. He'd been efficient, lining up an appraiser and a team to help list the house quickly. "Are you sure you want to do this so soon?" he asked gently. "Yes," I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. "I don't want to spend another night here pretending this was my life." He sighed, but he respected my choice. "I'll handle it." That evening, I found myself in the bedroom, our bedroom, standing in front of the dresser. My reflection in the mirror looked older than I remembered. My hair, once thick and chestnut, now had strands of gray that David always said he loved. I stared at myself, at the lines around my eyes, at the woman who'd been left behind. I opened the top drawer and found the small wooden box where David kept his cufflinks and spare change. Inside, among the coins and trinkets, I found a photograph folded into quarters. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. There he was, smiling beside Melissa, the woman from the funeral, and the boy, his son, standing between them, grinning at the camera. It looked like a family vacation photo. The sun behind them, a beach in the background. A part of me wanted to tear it to shreds, but another part of me wanted to see, to understand. How long had he been living this lie? Had he loved them more? Or had he just been too weak to choose? I placed the photo back in the box and closed it gently. It was his secret. But now it was mine too. Outside, the late summer sky turned pink and gold, the last rays of sun bleeding through the curtains. I felt the weight of the day pressing on my shoulders, but also a small, quiet strength. Every item I packed, every memory I sorted, was a step toward freedom, toward something new. Maybe that was the only way to survive betrayal, to dismantle the life you thought you had and build a new one from the ashes. I carried another box downstairs, the final click of the latch echoing in the emptiness of the house. Tomorrow the agent would come, and soon this place, our place, would belong to someone else. And me? I didn't know where I was going yet, but at least I knew I was leaving. Morning sunlight poured through the kitchen window, catching the dust motes dancing in the air like tiny, aimless insects. I sipped my coffee, black, no sugar, and tried to steady my hands. The real estate agent was scheduled to arrive at 9, and I wanted everything to look organized, though I felt anything but. At exactly 9 on the dot, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find a woman about my age, maybe early 50s, with neatly styled blonde hair and a warm but professional smile. "Good morning," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Ann Simmons from Hudson Valley Realty." Her handshake was firm, her eyes direct. "Come in," I said, stepping back. "Thank you for making time so quickly." "Of course," she replied, scanning the entryway. "I understand you're hoping to sell quickly?" "That's right," I said. I didn't bother explaining why. The last thing I needed was pity. She didn't ask, just nodded and pulled a slim notebook from her bag. "Can I take a quick walk through?" she asked. "Please," I said, leading her through the house. As she moved from room to room, she made quiet notes, sometimes pausing to ask, "Was this room recently painted?" Or, "Have you updated the appliances?" I answered her questions, mechanically, focusing on the logistics, but every question felt like a small cut. This house had been my home for more than 20 years. Every detail, from the floral wallpaper in the guest room to the antique mirror in the hallway, was a piece of the life I'd built with David. A life that, I was now realizing, had been built on a lie. Anne paused in the master bedroom, studying, the large bay window overlooking the back garden. "This is a beautiful space," she said softly. "So much natural light." I nodded, my throat tight. I used to wait there, watching for David's car in the driveway, rehearsing dinner conversations, or imagining weekend plans. I'd believed in those plans. Anne turned back to me. "You've done a wonderful job maintaining the house," she said. "It shouldn't be difficult to sell, especially if you're flexible with the price." "I'm very flexible," I said too quickly. "I just need it gone, everything, as soon as possible." She gave me a look that was both professional and understanding. "Of course," she said. "We can price it aggressively. Given the market, I'd estimate it'll sell within a month, maybe less. We'll need to do a few photos, but that can happen tomorrow." "Tomorrow is fine," I said. I didn't want to linger here. Every night I spent in this house now felt like a lie I was telling myself. Anne closed her notebook. "Once we sign the paperwork, I can get the listing up within a day or two. I'll handle the showings. You won't need to be here." "Good," I said. The thought of strangers wandering through the house didn't bother me. The house already felt like a stranger to me. Anne hesitated. "Do you have somewhere to go?" she asked. Her voice was gentle, not prying, but I could see the concern in her eyes. "I'm leaving the country," I said, surprising even myself with the clarity of it. "I need a fresh start." She blinked, but didn't ask why. "Well," she said, after a beat, "I think that's brave. Sometimes it takes losing everything to realize you can start over." She handed me her card. "Call me any time." "Thank you," I said, meaning it. After she left, I sat on the bottom step of the staircase and stared at the empty living room. The boxes I'd packed sat like silent witnesses to my pain, waiting to be moved on. Outside, a warm breeze rattled. The wind chimes by the porch. I thought about David, about his other family, about the lies he'd built. Then I thought about me, about the woman I used to be and the woman I was becoming. Anne was right. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find yourself. And maybe, just maybe, I'd find something even better on the other side. The house sold faster than I'd expected, or maybe I just hadn't expected anything at all. 2 weeks after Anne's first visit, she called me on a Friday afternoon with the news. "We have an offer at asking price," she said, her voice bright. "They'd like to close in 3 weeks. I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Relief because it meant I was free to leave. Sadness because even after everything, it was still hard to let go of the walls that had held my life together for so long. "That's fine," I told her. "Let's do it." Anne came by the next morning with the papers. I signed each one carefully, feeling like I was signing away a chapter of my life. When she left, I walked through the house one last time. Each room felt hollow, stripped of its warmth. The echoes of my laughter, our laughter, felt like ghosts. In the master bedroom, I stood by the window and looked out at the small garden. The hydrangeas I'd planted years ago were in full bloom, their petals a soft blue. For a moment, I imagined David standing behind me, his hand on my shoulder. But the image dissolved as quickly as it came. He wasn't here. He'd never really been here, not in the way I needed him to be. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, researching flights. The cursor blinked on the screen like a challenge. I'd never considered leaving the country before, but now, with everything gone, the idea didn't feel so impossible. It felt like a promise. A new start. I thought about where to go. Europe? Too many memories of trips David and I had planned but never taken. Asia? Beautiful, but too far. Then I thought about Costa Rica. Warm, vibrant, alive with color. A place where no one knew me, where I could disappear and reappear as someone new. I clicked through flight options. A one-way ticket to San Jose, leaving in 5 days. I hesitated for just a moment before I clicked purchase. The confirmation email pinged in my inbox like a jolt of adrenaline. It was real. That night, I sat on the back porch, a glass of wine in my hand, staring at the stars. I thought about the life I was leaving behind, the dinner parties, the shared holidays, the laughter that now felt like a lie. But I also thought about the woman I could become, stronger, wiser, unafraid to build a new life on her own terms. In the days that followed, I met with Anne and signed the final papers. The buyers wanted to move in as soon as possible. "They're excited," Anne said with a smile. "They love the garden." "I'm glad," I told her. And I meant it. Let them build new memories here. I'd take mine with me, or leave them behind. I wasn't sure which yet. On my last day in the house, I stood in the empty living room and let the silence fill me. I said a quiet goodbye to the woman who had lived here, the one who had believed in a husband who never fully existed. I promised myself, that I'd find a way to heal. Then I locked the door for the last time. The airport was quiet that morning, the terminal full of strangers rushing toward their own destinations. I moved through the security line with the surreal calm of someone stepping into a new story. At the gate, I watched the planes taxiing, each one a promise of possibility. When my flight was called, I took a deep breath, gathered my bag, and walked down the jet bridge. I didn't look back. I'd already spent too much time looking over my shoulder. As the plane lifted off, I felt the weight of the past begin to loosen its grip. I was no longer David's wife, no longer the woman left behind. I was Claire, just Claire, and I was free. The plane touched down in San Jose just after noon, the wheels kissing the tarmac with a soft jolt that felt like both an ending and a beginning. I peered out the window as the lush green hills rolled by, a stark contrast to the sterile gray of the airport I'd left behind. Inside the terminal, the air smelled different, humid, tinged with the scent of blooming flowers and ripe fruit. Spanish voices filled the space, an unfamiliar melody that made me both nervous and excited. Customs was a blur of forms and questions. "Purpose of visit?" the officer asked in accented English, his eyes scanning my face. "Starting over," I almost said, but instead I replied, "Personal." He stamped my passport with a thud and handed it back with a polite nod. "Bienvenida a Costa Rica." Outside, a wave of heat and sunlight hit me like a welcome. I shed the cardigan I'd worn on the plane and slung my bag over my shoulder, taking a moment to breathe in the tropical air. It smelled of possibility. I'd booked a modest Airbnb in Escazú, a quiet suburb known for its safe streets and friendly locals. The cab ride from the airport took about half an hour. The driver, a middle-aged man named José, tried to make small talk in broken English. I stumbled through my few phrases of Spanish, smiling apologetically. "Mi español es muy básico," I admitted, and he chuckled. "No problema," he said. "You learn. Costa Rica es muy tranquilo." That word, tranquilo, settled over me like a balm, peaceful, calm. I craved that more than anything. The Airbnb was a small, whitewashed casita at the end of a quiet lane, surrounded by hibiscus, bushes and bougainvillea. The host, a kindly woman named Elena, greeted me with a warm smile. "Welcome, Claire," she said in soft, accented English. "If you need anything at all, please let me know." "Thank you," I said, my voice catching with gratitude. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed kindness from a stranger. Inside, the casita was simple but charming. Terracotta tiles, wooden beams, and a small patio overlooking a garden alive with hummingbirds and butterflies. I set my suitcase down and ran my hand over the rough wooden table, grounding myself in the moment. That first night, I sat on the patio with a glass of water, watching the sky darken into a deep, inky blue. The cicadas sang their steady song, a lullaby for a woman learning to breathe again. I thought of David, of all the questions I'd never get answers to, but I didn't let myself dwell. I was in Costa Rica now, a place where no one knew me, where my past couldn't reach me unless I let it. The next morning, I woke to the sound of birdsong and the scent of fresh coffee drifting from the small kitchen. I brewed a cup and carried it to the patio, watching the sun climb over the hills. I felt like a different person already, lighter, unburdened. After breakfast, I wandered into the town center. The streets were lined with small shops, bakeries, and cafes. Children played soccer in the park, their laughter bright against the backdrop of Spanish chatter. I bought a few groceries and a Spanish phrasebook, determined to learn enough to navigate this new life. At a small cafe, I ordered a café con leche and sat by the window, the notebook I'd brought from home open in front of me. I began to write, not about David, not about the betrayal, but about the woman I was becoming. In those pages, I promised myself I'd learn the language, explore the beaches, hike the rainforests, and build a life that was truly my own. That afternoon, I returned to the casita and unpacked the few clothes I'd brought, neatly placing them in the wooden wardrobe. I found the photograph of David with his secret family tucked into the bottom of my suitcase. For a moment, I stared at it, my chest tight. Then, with a slow exhale, I tore it in half. His secrets didn't belong in my new life. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. I stood at the patio door, breathing in the warm air. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I felt something close to peace. Costa Rica was more than a place to escape. It was a place to heal. A place to begin again, and I intended to make the most of it. The days began to settle into a rhythm that felt almost like living. I woke each morning with the sunrise, brewed a cup of strong Costa Rican coffee, and sat on the small patio to greet the day. The garden bloomed around me, vibrant and alive, unlike the quiet corners of my old home that always seemed to whisper of what I'd lost. On the third morning, Elena knocked on my door. She was carrying a basket of fresh fruit, mangoes, papayas, tiny bananas that tasted sweeter than any I'd had before. "Claire," she said with a smile, "you must try these. You can't live here and not eat papaya." I laughed, the sound feeling unfamiliar but good. "Thank you, Elena. That's so kind." She set the basket on the kitchen counter. "How are you settling in?" "Better than I expected," I admitted. "It's peaceful here." She nodded knowingly. "It's why I came back. I lived in the US for years. Too busy, too many people in a hurry. Here you can breathe." Her words felt like a balm. After she left, I peeled a papaya and ate it on the patio, the sweet juice dripping down my fingers. It was a small, sensual pleasure I hadn't allowed myself in so long. That afternoon, I decided to venture into town. I'd seen a small language, school advertising Spanish lessons, and though the thought of sitting in a class with strangers terrified me, I knew I needed to learn. The school was housed in a bright yellow building near the Central Park. A handwritten sign in the window read, "Clases de Español para todos." Inside, a cheerful woman named Rosa greeted me in English tinged with musical Spanish. "Hello. You're new, yes?" she asked, her eyes crinkling with warmth. "Yes," I said, shifting my bag on my shoulder. "I'd like to sign up for beginner classes." She clapped her hands together. "Perfect. We have a small group starting tomorrow morning at 9. You'll love it." My stomach fluttered with nerves. "I hope so," I said. Rosa handed me a small brochure with class times and a list of recommended books. "Don't worry," she said gently. "We all start somewhere." I left the school feeling lighter, even as doubt gnawed at me. Could I really start over at my age? Could I make friends, learn the language, and build a life that didn't revolve around someone else's lies? I found a small cafe and ordered a café negro, sitting at a table near the window. I watched the locals pass by, mothers with children, teenagers laughing, an older man pushing a cart of handmade crafts. Their lives felt real in a way mine hadn't for years. An older woman at the next table caught my eye. She wore a straw, hat and bright red lipstick, and she carried herself with a confidence I envied. She smiled and raised her cup in greeting. "New here?" she asked, her English surprisingly crisp. "Yes," I said, returning her smile. "Just arrived a few days ago." She introduced herself as Marisol, a retired art teacher who had moved from San Francisco 5 years ago. "Costa Rica saved me," she said simply. "I was a mess when I arrived, but this place has a way of healing you if you let it." Her words struck a chord deep in my chest. "I hope that's true," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand gently. "It's true," she said. "Give it time." We sat there together, two strangers sharing the same secret, that sometimes you have to run away to find who you really are. That night, back in the casita, I unpacked the small watercolor set I'd brought from home. I hadn't painted in years. David always said it was a silly hobby. But now, alone in a place that felt both foreign and welcoming, I opened the set and let the colors flow. I painted the garden, the pink bougainvillea, the tiny hummingbirds that danced in the air. I painted the patio where I drank my morning coffee. And as I worked, I felt the first real flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Tomorrow I'd go to my first Spanish class. I'd meet new people. I'd learn to speak, really speak, in a language that was becoming my own. Maybe I was a mess. Maybe I didn't know who I was yet. But in that little casita, with paint on my hands and the scent of papaya in the air, I finally felt like I had a chance to find out. The next morning, I stood outside the language school with my stomach in knots, clutching my notebook like a lifeline. The building was painted the same cheerful yellow as before, the sun warming its walls like a promise. Inside, laughter and voices mingled in Spanish and English, a comforting blend that felt like a bridge between the old and the new. Rosa greeted me at the door with a warm smile. "Claire, welcome back. Come, come," she said, waving me inside. She led me to a small classroom filled with mismatched chairs and a whiteboard scrawled with Spanish verbs. A fan in the corner did its best to fight the humid air. 3 other students were already seated. A young woman named Sophie from Canada, a retired German doctor named Klaus, and a middle-aged Brazilian named Lucia, who wore bright lipstick and an easy smile. I settled into a chair near the window, grateful for the morning breeze. Rosa clapped her hands. "Buenos dias a todos," she called out, her voice like sunshine. "Today, we will practice introductions and talk about our reasons for being here." She glanced around the room, her eyes landing on me. "Claire, would you like to start?" Panic rose in my throat, but I swallowed it down. "Soy Claire," I said, the words clumsy in my mouth. "Vivo en Escazú, desde hace una semana." I stumbled over the phrase, but managed a small smile. Rosa beamed at me. "Muy bien, Claire. And why are you here?" I hesitated. How could I explain that I was here because my husband had lied to me, because I'd sold my home, because I was trying to find a version of myself I hadn't seen in decades? I settled for the simplest truth. "Quiero empezar de nuevo," I said. "I want to start over." Lucia clapped softly, her bracelets jangling. "Bravo," she said. "Muy valiente. Very brave." I felt a blush rise to my cheeks. Brave. I didn't feel brave. I felt raw, like a wound still healing. But maybe bravery wasn't the absence of pain. Maybe it was showing up anyway. The rest of the class unfolded in a rhythm of broken Spanish and laughter. Rosa taught us basic questions, corrected our mistakes with gentle humor, and praised every small success. By the end of the hour, I found myself laughing with Sophie about the difference between embarazada and avergonzada, grateful for the kindness of strangers. After class, I walked with Lucia to the cafe across the street. She ordered a café con leche and I followed suit, trying to soak up every phrase she used with the barista. We settled at a small table under a leafy awning. You're brave, Lucia said again, stirring her coffee. It takes courage to leave everything behind. I looked at her, at the confidence in her posture and the kindness in her eyes. I didn't feel like I had a choice, I admitted. My husband, my voice caught. He wasn't who I thought he was. Lucia reached across the table and touched my hand. Sometimes life forces us to choose, she said, to let go. But you chose to come here, to live. That's more than most people ever do. Her words settled over me like a balm, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel so alone. We finished our coffees and walked back toward the school. Just before we parted ways, Lucia turned to me. Claire, she said, tomorrow there is a local market in the plaza. You should come. It's the best way to practice your Spanish and your courage. She winked. I laughed, feeling lighter. I'll be there. Back at the casita that afternoon, I stood on the patio, the sun warm on my shoulders. The garden buzzed with life, hummingbirds darting between flowers, the scent of ripe mangoes sweet in the air. I felt something unfurling inside me, a tiny bud of resilience. Maybe it wasn't bravery exactly, but it was something close. Thought of David, of the lies he'd spun, the life I'd thought was real. But the ache in my chest felt softer now. The hurt hadn't vanished, but it wasn't holding me hostage anymore. Tomorrow, I'd go to the market. I'd practice my Spanish, meet more strangers, and let this new life continue to shape me. I was still learning, still healing, but at least I was moving forward, and for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. Saturday morning dawned warm and bright, the sky brushed with streaks of pink and gold. I dressed in a simple cotton dress and sandals, tied my hair back, and stood on the patio sipping my coffee. The air smelled of ripe fruit and damp earth, and for the first time since arriving in Costa Rica, I felt a spark of anticipation. The plaza was already alive when I arrived. Vendors were setting up their stalls under colorful canopies, bright blue, red, and yellow, and the air buzzed with Spanish chatter and the scent of grilled arepas and sweet tamales. I could hear laughter from children chasing one another around the fountain in the center, their voices carrying above the hum of the crowd. I paused at the entrance, the pulse of the market thrumming through me. It felt like stepping into another world, one where my past had no place. I took a deep breath and let the sounds and colors wash over me. Lucia waved from a small stall selling handmade jewelry. "Claire," she called, her smile as bright as the silver earrings that lined her table. "Bienvenida." "Hola, Lucia," I replied, my accent thick but my smile genuine. She reached out and squeezed my hand. "You came. Good. This is where Costa Rica comes alive." She showed me around, introducing me to vendors who sold everything from woven baskets to carved wooden figurines. I stopped at a stand with rows of ripe mangoes and papayas, inhaling their sweet scent. The vendor, a young woman with a warm smile, greeted me in rapid Spanish. I hesitated, searching for the right words. "Quiero uno de estos, por favor," I managed, pointing to a plump mango. "Claro," she said, and wrapped the fruit in newspaper, handing it to me with a grin. I paid her and felt a small rush of pride. It was just a mango, but it was also a step, a small victory. As we walked, Lucia led me to a stand selling small paintings. A young artist sat on a stool, her hands stained with bright colors. The paintings were simple but beautiful: birds in flight, lush jungles, quiet beaches. One painting caught my eye. A hummingbird frozen mid-flight, its wings a blur of green and blue. "It's beautiful," I whispered. Lucia watched me carefully. "Maybe it reminds you of something," she said. I nodded, my throat tight. "David always said hummingbirds were good luck," I murmured. The memory hit me unexpectedly, a sharp ache. But as I stood there, watching the tiny bird on the canvas, I realized that maybe the meaning was mine to reclaim now. I turned to the artist. "Quanto cuesta?" I asked, my voice stronger than I felt. She smiled. "Quince mil," she replied. 15,000 colones. I handed her the money and cradled the painting to my chest. As we walked away, Lucia leaned closer. "That was brave," she said. I smiled at her. "Thank you for bringing me here," I said, the words catching in my throat. We found a shady bench and shared fresh coconut water from a vendor, watching the bustle of the market swirl around us. For the first time, I felt less like an outsider and more like a part of something. As the afternoon sun began to dip, I said goodbye to Lucia and headed back to the casita. The air smelled of sun-warmed earth and the faint tang of rain. Inside, I hung the hummingbird painting on the wall above the small desk where I'd started to write in my journal each night. I stared at it for a long time, thinking of all the things it represented. Freedom, resilience, hope. David had given the hummingbird one meaning, but now it was mine. I poured myself a glass of water and sat at the desk, my journal open. I wrote about the market, the people, the mango, the painting. I wrote about the ache that still lingered in my chest and the strength I felt growing, small but undeniable. Outside, the cicadas began their evening song, and I let their voices remind me that even in unfamiliar places there could be music. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for tonight, I felt a sense of quiet triumph. I was no longer just surviving. I was living. A heavy rainstorm rolled in that evening, sweeping across Escazú with a force I hadn't expected. Thunder rattled the casita's windows, and sheets of water turned the garden into a blur of green and silver. I stood by the patio door, my fingers pressed against the cool glass, feeling small beneath the weight of the sky. I'd always loved the rain back home, quiet afternoons with a book and a cup of tea. But tonight, the downpour felt different. The water drummed against the roof in a relentless rhythm, echoing the turmoil in my chest. It had been weeks since I left New York, yet the memories clung like the damp air. David's betrayal, the funeral, the faces of the people who'd once been my family. Some nights, the questions came back with a vengeance. Why hadn't I seen it? Had I been blind? Stupid? Tonight, the storm seemed to open those questions like a wound. I sat on the small couch with my knees tucked to my chest, watching the rain pour down. I missed the comforting hum of familiarity, the small rituals that had once anchored my life. I'd started to build new habits here, morning coffee on the patio, Spanish classes, evening walks. But tonight they felt fragile, like paper boats in a flood. A knock at the door startled me. I hesitated, glancing at the clock. 9:30. Another knock, firmer this time. I opened the door to find Lucia standing there, her raincoat dripping, hair plastered to her forehead. She held a small umbrella in one hand and a half-eaten empanada in the other. "Hola, Claire," she said, smiling through the rain. "I brought you dinner." I blinked at her. "Lucia, it's pouring." She waved her hand dismissively. "The rain doesn't stop life here," she said. "May I come in?" I stepped aside, and she breezed in, shedding her wet raincoat and revealing a bright floral blouse. "I made too many empanadas," she said, setting them on the small table. "And I thought maybe you'd like some company tonight." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Thank you," I said, my voice trembling. "That's kind." She turned. To me, her eyes soft. "You don't have to be alone tonight, Claire. Not here." I let out a shaky breath. I didn't realize how hard tonight would be, I confessed. Back home, I always had someone, even if it was a lie. Here, I'm still learning how to be on my own. Lucia's face softened. She reached for my hand across the table. "Claire," she said, "sometimes the hardest part is realizing we don't have to do it alone. I've been where you are, leaving behind a life that wasn't really mine. It's terrifying, but you're not alone, mi amiga." Her words broke something inside me, a dam I hadn't even realized I'd built. Tears welled up and spilled down my cheeks. Lucia pulled me into a hug, and for the first time since the funeral, I let myself cry without shame. We sat together as the storm raged outside. Lucia told me about her own journey, leaving an abusive marriage, moving to Costa Rica with nothing but a suitcase and a broken heart. She told me how the rain here was different, how it washed things clean if you let it. "You're stronger than you think," she said, brushing a tear from my cheek. "Look at what you've already done. You left everything behind to find yourself. Again. That's not weakness, Claire. That's courage." Her words settled deep inside me, planting a seed of hope I hadn't felt in years. When the rain finally eased, Lucia rose and kissed my cheek. "Come to the cafe tomorrow," she said. "We'll practice Spanish, or just talk. I'll be there." "Thank you," I whispered. She smiled. "You're not alone, Claire. Remember that." After she left, I sat in the quiet, the storm fading to a gentle drizzle. I felt the weight in my chest begin to lift, just a little. Lucia was right. I wasn't alone, not anymore. I went to the small table where the hummingbird painting hung and traced its outline with my finger. It felt like a promise. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. New challenges, no doubt, and maybe new fears. But for tonight, I knew I wasn't facing them alone, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The next morning dawned warm and clear, the rain from the night before leaving the world fresh and alive. I woke to the sound of birdsong and the smell of strong Costa Rican coffee drifting in from the small kitchen. It felt different today, like a door had opened just a crack, letting in a sliver of light. I dressed and walked into town, the streets already bustling with people setting up for the day. Fruit vendors arranging their bright produce, small cafes opening their doors, children in uniforms heading to school. Each face felt like a promise of something new. I made my way to the cafe where Lucia said she'd be. The place was small and bright, with hand-painted tables and a chalkboard menu that changed daily. Lucia was already there, her lipstick as bold as ever, chatting with the barista in rapid Spanish. She saw me and waved, her smile lighting up. "Her face! Claire!" she called, patting the chair next to her. "Sit, sit. I ordered you a café con leche." I laughed and slid into the chair, feeling a warmth spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the coffee. "How are you feeling today?" she asked, her eyes kind. "Better," I said honestly. "Last night, it meant a lot to have." "You there?" She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "We all need someone, Claire, even the strongest of us." We sipped our coffees, the hum of conversation around us like a comforting blanket. Lucia pointed to a flyer on the community board near the entrance. "There's an art fair in Santa Ana this weekend," she said. "Local artists, music, food. You should come." My heart fluttered. "I haven't shown my paintings to anyone in years," I said. She smiled, her eyes dancing. "Then it's time you do. Bring your hummingbird. Bring your colors. Let people see who you are." Her words sparked something inside me, a memory of the woman I'd been before David's lies, before I'd stopped believing in my own talents. "I'll think about it," I said, though even as I spoke, I felt the old fears rising. What if no one liked my work? What if I wasn't good enough? Lucia leaned back in her chair, studying me. "Claire, sometimes you have to jump, even if you're afraid." I carried her words with me as I walked home that afternoon, stopping to buy fresh fruit from a small stand. The vendor smiled and called me amiga, and for the first time, I didn't feel like a stranger. Back at the casita, I dug out my small watercolor set and the hummingbird painting. I set up my supplies on the patio table and began to paint, the colors flowing from my brush like music. I let the sounds of the town drift in, the call of a street vendor, the laughter of children, the distant notes of a guitar, and felt my own rhythm begin to emerge. As the sun began to set, I looked at the paintings spread before me. Some were messy, others vibrant, but they were mine. Each one a step toward a life that felt honest, that felt real. That evening I called Rosa at the language school. "Hola, Rosa," I said, my Spanish still halting but more confident. "I'd like to sign up for more classes. I want to get better." She laughed, warm and bright. "Perfecto, Claire. We'll see you tomorrow." After I hung up, I sat on the patio with a glass of wine, watching the sky turn from gold to deep blue. I thought of David, of all the things he'd taken from me and all the things I'd allowed myself to lose. But here, in Costa Rica, I was finding pieces of myself I hadn't even known were missing. Maybe it wasn't about replacing the life I'd left behind, but about building something new from the pieces that remained. Tomorrow, I'd go to the language school. I'd meet more people. I'd paint, and maybe even share my art at the fair. The future wasn't certain, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of it. I was ready to jump. The art fair in Santa Ana was more vibrant than I could have imagined, a celebration of color, music, and life. Rows of tents lined the cobblestone streets, each one bursting with creativity: paintings, ceramics, jewelry, and local crafts. The scent of grilled corn and sweet tamales drifted in the warm air, mingling with the laughter of children and the melodies of a guitarist strumming near the fountain. I stood at the entrance, my small collection of paintings stacked neatly in. A wooden crate at my feet. The hummingbird piece rested on top, its wings frozen mid-flight, a reminder of everything I'd survived to get here. Lucia appeared at my side, her smile as radiant as the tropical flowers in her hair. "You made it," she said, giving my hand a squeeze. "I did," I replied, the words carrying both pride and disbelief. She led me to the small table we'd rented together, draping a bright tablecloth over it and helping me set up my work. I arranged the paintings carefully, each one a testament to the journey I'd made, from betrayal and loss to resilience and hope. "Look at you," Lucia said, her eyes shining. "An artist." I laughed softly. I forgot how much this part of me mattered, I said. As the fair began, people drifted by, pausing to admire the paintings. A young couple stopped at the hummingbird and asked about its meaning. I explained, in my halting Spanish, that it represented freedom, courage, and the ability to start over. The woman smiled and squeezed my hand. "Es muy hermoso," she said. "It's very beautiful." With each conversation, my confidence grew. I found myself sharing not just my art, but my story, the woman who'd left everything behind to build a life that was truly hers. And each time I spoke, the weight of David's betrayal felt lighter. Later that afternoon, I took a break and wandered through the fair. Music floated on the breeze, a local band playing a salsa rhythm that made my feet tap. Children danced. In the square, their laughter rising like a blessing. I found Rosa near a stall selling pottery. She grinned and hugged me tightly. "Claire!" she exclaimed. "Your Spanish is getting so good." I laughed, feeling a warm glow spread through me. "Gracias," I said. "I've been practicing." She beamed. "See, you're not just surviving anymore. You're thriving." Her words echoed in my heart. I realized then that thriving wasn't about erasing the past. It was about choosing to build something new, even with the scars. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Lucia found me again. "Come on," she said, pulling me toward the dance floor. "We're celebrating." "I can't dance," I protested, but she just laughed. "You can," she said. "And even if you can't, who cares? This is your life now. Live it." So I danced, awkward and laughing and alive, in the middle of a Costa Rican street fair, surrounded by strangers who felt like family. The music pulsed through me, the rhythm catching hold of something deep inside. In that moment, I let go. Of David, of the pain, of the fear. When the last note faded and I stood breathless beneath the stars, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. Lucia hugged me, her eyes shining. "You did it, Claire," she whispered. "You found yourself." I smiled, tears prickling my eyes. "Yeah," I said. "I think I did." That night back at the casita, I sat on the patio with the hummingbird painting propped against the wall. I ran my fingers over its wings and thought of all the ways I'd learned to fly, not because of someone else, but because of me. This wasn't just the end of a story. It was the beginning of a new one, mine, and I was ready to live it.